We just built our house, Will and I. Last month we were able to move in. It's small, not even 1,000 square feet. His parents call it a micro home. I call it perfect. It's just us and our 2 dogs. Well, 3 now, but I'll talk about that in a minute. First, I should explain a few things so this story makes more sense. I've lived most of my life here in Colorado. I was born and raised in Denver. I took a hiatus when I went to college out of state, but I came back. It's home. Our new house is just east of the Front Range and south of Denver. We're pretty far out of the city. It takes 30 minutes or so to reach the city limits of Denver. Our nearest and pretty much only neighbor, Steve, is just over half a mile away, which isn't really all that far. I can see his house from here as I type this. He's also my best friend and has been since high school. It's really an awesome setup for Will and I, and we love it. But last night didn't go so well. Will is out of town for work for 4 days, leaving me and the dogs alone in the new place for the first time. It didn't occur to me to be bothered by this since I've spent plenty of nights alone before. The day was as normal as could be. I drove Will to the airport without any trouble, came home, took the dogs for a stroll around the property, got some work done. I talked to Will on Skype for a while, made dinner and retired to the deck out back afterwards. I was sitting in a chair, enjoying the cool air, minding my own business. Down the road a bit, I could see the lights on in Steve's house. Not a thing seemed to be out of the ordinary. I was so enjoying the night air that I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment, took in the smells and sounds of nature around me, and that's when one of the dogs growled. The sound made me sit up so fast I almost fell out of my chair. I studied the 3 dogs and figured out pretty quickly that it was Big Ben who had made the noise. Ears alert, he was staring off into the night with keen eyes. The 2 girls were equally alert, although they didn't seem to have heard or seen what he had to look to him while he continued to gaze towards the dark yard. He gave another low, almost inaudible growl. Now, there's certain sounds that dogs make that really put you on alert. This was one of them. It was an unsure, almost hesitant growl, like something was spooking him, but he didn't know exactly what. I followed his gaze, but nothing within the confines of the fenced-in backyard seemed amiss, unless there was an animal just beyond the wooden fence. As far as I could tell, there was nothing at all for him to be growling about. I watched him for a minute, and he kept looking in the same place. He'd sniff the air and his ears would swivel, as though something just beyond his ability to sense was out there. I started to feel a little creeped out, but the other 2 dogs, Danny and Nina, didn't seem to be picking up on anything. I studied him for a few more minutes, and finally convinced myself he was either overreacting about something or imagining things. So Big Ben is our newest addition. He showed up a few weeks before the house was finished, just out of the blue one day while I was checking on the progress of things. He's a massive, shaggy black bear of a dog. Although he appeared to be a stray, he had come right up to me, tail wagging, and greeted me as though he'd been my dog all his life. Who could turn him away? We took him in immediately. The vet we took him to found no microchip, and no one around had heard of a missing dog, so we tapped him. Will was the one who named him, and a fitting name it is. He's 100 pounds and his shoulder almost comes up to my hip. I'm convinced he's got wolf in him. He's been like an oversized puppy from day one, never aggressive and as obedient and loyal as our girls. But at times I have some trouble figuring him out. Sometimes he does weird things, growls at nothing, stops dead in his tracks like he hears something, or stares into the distance like he thinks he sees something. At the end of the day, we have no idea what his life was like before us. It was possible was on his own for months. The vet thinks he's about 3. His heightened sense of awareness could just be from being on his own for so long, having to look out for himself. Nonetheless, I felt a distinct shift in the atmosphere as a result of him growling into the darkness. I was genuinely uneasy, and for the first time since Will had left, was fully appreciating the fact that aside from my trio of dogs, I was alone. My eyes involuntarily drifted towards Steve's house. The light from within gave me a sense of comfort. Knowing I could pick up the phone and have him at the door in minutes calmed me down some, but I wasn't about to bother him over this. I was going to head back in for the night when I looked towards the black shadow of the mountains, and then I heard it. It was a very faint, almost indiscernible sound coming from the woods. A pattering sound, like something walking on the forest floor. It was so faint that I wasn't even sure if I was hearing it or my ears were playing tricks on me. It could have been the light breeze rustling the leaves. And then a light wind came up, and I swear the moment it did, I heard what sounded like someone saying, "Shh." That freaked me out, but when I strained to listen, it was hard to distinguish the sounds of the wind and the leaves from anything else. I thought I imagined it. The dark was making me freak myself out. The sound of faint footfalls continued. It went on for a few minutes before it was so faint I couldn't tell if it was wind or not. I shrugged it off. There's deer back there, and stray cats and probably other animals I never even see. There was no reason to worry about it, but it still sufficiently creeped me out. So I went back inside. I watched Netflix, yay Peaky Blinders, for a bit but got sleepy. By 11 I was in bed, and it didn't take long for me to fall asleep. But I didn't stay asleep. A sharp, urgent growl woke me up with a start. When your dogs alert you like that when you're awake, it's unnerving enough. Waking up to it is worse. My immediate thought was there's something going on that I've missed. Not a pleasant feeling. My heart was racing as I strained to see in the dark. Big Ben was sitting at the foot of the bed, looking towards the window. The curtains were drawn, so there was no way he could possibly see anything there. Then Danny gave a growl, and Nina chimed in. I'm not gonna lie, I was already scared. It's hard to not let your imagination run away with you in that situation. There was a light breeze, and to my horror I realized I had left the window open. I never leave windows open at night, not even when Will is home. Our bedroom is on the ground floor and I don't feel safe doing it. I felt even more vulnerable knowing I had stupidly left the damn window open. Big Ben growled again. This was different from the unsure growling he had done on the deck. This was louder, more urgent, more like he knew what he was hearing or smelling, and it was something that absolutely warranted being growled at. Another breeze rustled the curtains, and there was an unnatural shift in the shadows outside. Something was moving out there on my deck. I sat bolt upright, causing the dogs to go into full-on protection mode. Big Ben was barking his warning bark, and the girls joined. At the sound, whatever was outside ran for it. Heavy, loud footfalls could be heard above the chaotic barking as it bolted along the deck. With my dogs flanking me, I reached through the slit in the curtains, slammed the window shut, and locked it. I yanked the curtains fully closed, rolled back across the bed, and pulled out the revolver I keep in my nightstand. The dogs were going berserk, and I had to almost yell to get them to stop barking. I got my phone and called Steve. Still growling, Big Ben poked his head behind the curtain to look outside. I was shaking all over, sweating bullets as the phone rang. Nina stood at the closed bedroom door like a sentry, ears erect, listening for further threats. Danny was standing upright but still on the bed. I had never been so glad to have them. Steve picked up, sounding sleepy, and I told him what happened. I was almost crying as I did, and he told me not to move because he was coming over. I couldn't have moved if I tried. I was too terrified. I just sat in bed with the gun in hand and dogs surrounding me. I finally noticed the time, 2:15 in the morning. I heard Steve let himself in not 5 minutes later. We keep keys to each other's houses, and he knocked on the bedroom door. Leah, are you alright? Yeah, it's open, I told him. He came in and was wide-eyed and looked about as scared as I was. He was carrying his shotgun with him. The dogs were usually all over him when he visited, but they pushed past him to go investigate the house. Which way do you think it ran? Steve asked me immediately, peering out the bedroom window. It took off towards the trees, I said, still in disbelief. He looked in the direction of the woods that bordered the property. Could it have been a deer? He asked. I strained to remember the sound of whatever it was thundering across the deck. I felt sick at my stomach. I wanted it to be a deer. I so wanted it to have been a wild animal that had simply wandered too close. It could have been, replied. Truth was, deep down, I knew whatever had sprinted across my deck hadn't done so on 4 legs. Steve looked concerned, like he knew I didn't really believe that theory, but didn't say anything. It could have just been kids playing a prank or something? I asked, hoping it could be as simple as that. He glanced uneasily out the window again. I could tell he was trying hard not to scare me. I know my best friend. He thought it was something more malignant than kids being jerks. Big Ben came back into the bedroom. He licked Steve's hand and jumped on the bed, curling up so he was practically on my lap. Steve, against my wishes, went to investigate the deck. I watched him the whole time from the window, still reeling in from the whole ordeal. If it had indeed been a human out there, my paranoid mind was convinced they were just beyond the trees, still watching the house. I was on edge until he came back inside. He had walked around the perimeter of the entire house with his shotgun, and found no trace of anything. Nonetheless, I was still shaken up, and he agreed to stay the rest of the night. I made up the couch for him, and we sat up and talked about the strange event for a while, exchanging various theories, until both of us felt safe enough to sleep. Whatever had been outside my window was probably long gone, and I was even beginning to believe it could have been an animal of some sort. I had been half asleep when it all happened. It could easily have been a deer or even a coyote or something, and I had let my imagination get the better of me. I slept until almost noon, and when I woke up, Steve was still asleep on the couch, so I sat down to write this out. It's what I do. I'm a freelance writer, and typing this out just feels right, cathartic even. I've already decided not to tell Will what happened, at least not while he's away. He's a worrywart, and it would only upset him. He'll be home in 3 days, and I'll tell him then. I'm looking out the window towards the tree line now, and feeling unsettled all over again. My dogs are curled up nearby, and Steve, along with his shotgun, are 1 room over. I'm perfectly safe, but something just feels off today. Something's not right, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. It's making it difficult to sit still for long. I keep finding myself looking out the window. For the first time, I feel intimidated by my new house, the isolation and remoteness of it. The forested area at the edge of the property was a big deciding factor when we bought this land. There's good hiking back in there, and the trees are beautiful in the winter. But now, It's a foreboding place to me, a place where bad things can hide. The worst part of it is not knowing what or who had been practically pressed against my open bedroom window. Maybe it had been a deer and I was overreacting, but if it had been a human, why my window, why my house, and why on the first night I was there alone? Could they have been watching and waiting for this particular night? I know your mind can go to some pretty dark places when it's the middle of the night. Things always seem scarier then, but after what happened, can you blame me? Big Ben hasn't let me get much more than 3 feet from him since last night. Nina and Danny are a little restless too. I let them outside in the fenced yard for a bit. Running around and playing seemed to help their moods, but Ben didn't go out and play. He went to the edge of the yard, did his business, and came right back to be glued at my side. I don't think I've seen his ears relax since we left. I took a walk around the deck just now. It wraps around the whole house, with a gate you have to go through to get to the part that overlooks the fenced yard. When I opened it, I noticed it wasn't latched all the way. I figured Steve had neglected to pull it shut the whole way when he was checking things out last night. Along the side of the deck where the animal, or person, had been, I have large planters with white hydrangeas growing. It didn't take long to notice that my hydrangea blooms are wilted and brown, like they'd been nipped by frost. I know it wasn't that cold last night, and this discovery has weirded me out all over again. I'm going to show Steve when he gets up, and maybe we can figure out who or what was skulking around my house in the dead of the night.